Blockchain. Innovation or illusion?
It seems for the last few years, everybody's been talking about cryptocurrency and its many incarnations. From Bitcoin to Ethereum, from NFTs to DAOs, from staking to DeFi. There's no shortage of buzzwords in technobabble, but at the center of everything is one word: blockchain.
Blockchain is a new network, and it's going to help us decentralize trade, allowing us to do a lot of our transactions much more peer-to-peer directly and lower our use of intermediaries like companies or banks maybe.
So what is Bitcoin? Some people think that Bitcoin is just a giant scam. Some people think that Bitcoin is the wave of the future.
I predict in the next 10 years that crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin, all of this innovation will be the 12th sector of the S&P.
For the first time in human history, we can grant property rights to 8 billion people.
Bitcoin's not just a technology. Bitcoin's not just an asset. Bitcoin's not just an ideological movement. Bitcoin is a rebirth. It is a rebirth of our society, of our economy. It is the rebirth of humanity.
So are cryptocurrencies real currency? Who cares?
And there's nothing more important happening in the world, other than maybe the heat death of the sun itself, than Bitcoin.
But listen, as long as you recognize the very real possibility that the whole investment case for crypto rests on the greater fool theory, you're got my blessing to speculate on it.
If you actually understand what blockchain does, it takes away all the leverage that the countries in our world have outside of their atomic bombs.
Everything in the world of crypto revolves around this one construct: blockchain. Ask 100 people and you get 100 different definitions, most of which still don't reveal any true understanding of what it is and why everybody seems excited by it and the future it can bring. At the same time, there's people who claim the whole industry is nothing but multi-levels of pyramid-shaped smoke and mirrors. Is crypto going to save the world from an impending economic collapse of the existing monetary and finance system? Or is it just a giant decentralized Ponzi scheme? Well, stay tuned because we're finally going to settle this dispute once and for all. Okay, let's be realistic. This debate isn't likely to be settled any more easily than which American car manufacturer sucks the least. It's entirely probable that no amount of evidence will convince some people to change their minds, and for this reason, the crypto industry on many levels seems to be more cult-like than business-like. Nonetheless, come with me as we take a detailed look into the core technology that all of crypto is based on. I'm talking about blockchain. Wait. Before your eyes glaze over, widen, or roll, the goal of this video is not to overwhelm you with a bunch of technobabble. Many of you are under the impression that this tech is so complex and amazing, you aren't capable of understanding how it works, and you're just supposed to trust the nice guy in the Hawaiian shirt with laser eyes that he knows what's best for society. Well, I'm here to dispel that myth. Is blockchain really that hard to understand? Not really. Is it an amazing disruptive technology that will forever change the world of money and finance? It depends on who you ask. Is it nothing more than a giant MLM, pyramid, or Ponzi scheme? It depends on who you ask. Those are pretty wide extremes. So does this mean the truth is somewhere in the middle? The answer may surprise you.
If you're still into fiat, you might be in an abusive, unhealthy relationship.
Okay, here's a $10 bill. This is garbage. This is garbage. Your people in South Africa, you have your rand, right? That's going to zero. That's going to zero. This is going to zero too. Euros are going to zero. The yen's going to zero. The Chinese currency is going to zero. It's all going to zero against Bitcoin.
Selling 101.
So if someone is trying to sell you on some new technology, they shouldn't have to try so hard to convince you the existing tech you're using is horrible. Instead, they should show you how and why this new tech is better. And it should be obvious, don't you think? So, there's no need to talk about what is broken about the existing system. What we need to talk about is what is better about the proposed new system.
What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer digital currency. It's anonymous and it's decentralized. It's like being able to teleport money to anyone across the world. No.
There's no better way to get a firm grasp of the entirety of the cryptocurrency industry than by examining its core component, blockchain. All crypto projects have one primary component in common: blockchain. It's the unique defining element of all the other subsequent spin-offs, from NFTs to Web3 to digital tokens to DAOs, DeFi, FinTech, and everything in between. Everything hinges on blockchain. We're going to dig deep into what blockchain is and how it works. We're going to go through one by one each and every popular claim that people make about blockchain and what it promises to do for society. Does it live up to the hype? See for yourself. For a supposedly innovative and disruptive technology, there's a notable absence of actual technology experts in mainstream media hyping crypto and blockchain. Instead, you are more likely to find salesmen, paid influencers, and people of random vocational expertise, along with the occasional CEO who's previously been in trouble with the SEC, talking about the benefits of this brave new financial world. Let's fix this. Let's hear from some tech people about the actual tech.
I do think people get bought into these manias who may not have as much money to spare. So I'm not bullish on Bitcoin, and my general thought would be that if you have less money than Elon, you should probably watch out.
Why aren't you bullish on Bitcoin?
Look, there are things we invest in society that produce output.
Basically, there's no value in this space. None, zero, zilch, zippo, and I'm going to tell you why. Private blockchains are a 20-plus-year-old idea. Public blockchains are grossly inefficient without actually being decentralized, like criminally inefficient, and only are good for cryptocurrencies. And cryptocurrencies don't work as currency unless you're a criminal. The entire space is a self-assembled Ponzi scheme. This is basically intellectual vaccination. Once you realize how bleeding stupid the space is, how incredibly brain-dead stupid it is, you'll be immune from wasting your time on them.
Understanding crypto technology. It's easier than you think.
Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ethereum, blockchain, smart contracts, non-fungible tokens, decentralized autonomous organizations, DeFi, staking, fintech, Web3, etc., etc. This industry is full of colorful buzzwords. Many people are confused about what these terms mean. They are often badgered into thinking this high-tech world is too complicated for regular people to understand. But is that really the case? Think about it like this. Imagine all the technology we use. Could you explain to somebody what's special about the internet, fax machines, the microwave oven, self-driving cars, the electric light bulb? All of these things are what we call disruptive technology, new inventions that are clear improvements over existing systems and have disrupted or changed our way of doing things. For example, do you need to understand the nature of atomic particles and radiation to appreciate the value of a microwave oven? If someone asks me, what's so special about a microwave? I can answer that in 5 seconds. It cooks many foods faster than conventional methods. Need a specific example? Here's a potato. I can bake it in the oven for 3 hours or in 5 minutes in a microwave. Clear as day, this is innovation. It's disruptive. There's no ambiguity there. It clearly does something better, faster, more efficiently. So anything that's truly innovative and disruptive, especially something being sold to the public, should be able to be easily described in simple terms, and everyday people should be able to get it. You don't need to sit through a 60-minute video on the history of cooking food to appreciate the microwave. Its innovation is obvious. And this is the problem with crypto and blockchain. For almost a decade and a half, this tech has been around, and getting somebody to explain it in simple terms, what it's uniquely good for, seems to be an exercise in frustration. Should it be that way? No. And that's the first sign something here may not be right. Before we get into the specifics of the technology, let's first talk about some of the terminology and psychology that surrounds the crypto industry.
Crypto psychology.
Picture, it's gone again.
Yes. Where have you hidden it this time?
I didn't take it. Why should I take it? It's no use to me.
Why should you take other things? Pencils, knives.
Hold on.
Bella, where's the picture?
Crypto gaslighting.
Maybe you've heard of the term gaslighting. It's a colloquialism loosely defined as making someone question their own reality. Originating from the 1944 film Gaslight, the plot involves a man who is trying to find the riches stored in the house of a well-to-do family. He marries an heir to the family, and they live in the house. As he begins to find things and appropriate them, his wife notices things missing. He convinces her that it's her fault and she's losing her mind. Among other things, when he's searching in the attic for things to steal, He turns on the upstairs lights, which cause the downstairs gas lights to flicker. She notices this. He tells her the lights aren't flickering, hence the term gaslighting, for convincing somebody that what they think is happening really isn't happening. The term may also be used to describe a person, a gaslighter, who presents a false narrative to another group or person which leads them to doubt their perception and become misled, disoriented, or distressed. Oftentimes, this is for the gaslighter's own benefit. In the world of crypto, there's a lot of gaslighting happening. The most common version is when crypto is described to others and they don't think it makes much sense, that they're told, "You don't understand."
I don't understand crypto. I don't understand crypto. What is it anyway? No physical money, so what is it you actually buy? What is it you even buy?
All the elaborate terminology also serves to confuse people and make them think crypto technology is too complicated for most people to get. In reality, it's not. NFTs are a good example of this. People paying huge amounts of money for a cartoon image of an ape. Really? Yes, really. Okay, boomer, you're too old to understand. This is the future! That's gaslighting. Instead of going into detail on why something so intangible would be worth so much, you're simply dismissed as not being capable of appreciating NFTs. It's your fault for not seeing this obvious value. Another way people are gaslit in the crypto industry is being unilaterally told certain things are good and certain things are bad. This often involves gross oversimplification of complicated systems, resulting in dichotomies like centralization is bad, decentralization is good, government bad, Bitcoin good, central banks bad, blockchain good. In fact, the word decentralized is a fundamental meme in the world of crypto. Proponents repeat it ad nauseum as if it's an instant gold medal award in debate. Declare something in the crypto world decentralized and bam, it's automatically assumed to be better than anything that's centralized or subject to government influence. Rarely is there any actual evidence presented that justifies such an assertion. You're just expected to acknowledge this unsupported universal truth. And if you don't, well then you're crazy, you're part of the problem, or you don't understand.
Decentralization.
This leads us to one of the first points we need to address. Decentralization. Is it really better? Is this innovative and disruptive if we take a system and decentralize it? The concept of decentralization is supposed to go like this. You take a system like a database keeping track of money, art, or other things, and instead of having that system managed by a single entity like a government or corporation, you decentralize it and spread the responsibility among an array of random, anonymous nodes that basically follow a very specific set of instructions. What's the main motivation for decentralizing something? To claim there is no overseer, there is no evil emperor who can mess with your new decentralized system. This is supposed to imply that such a system is immune from corruption and otherwise unstoppable. Remember, one of the principles in the crypto world is that you can't trust central authorities, least of all governments, to do anything right. So let's create some computer code and offload as much as we can to an array of unknown machines, primarily located in communist countries. Wait. That doesn't seem to make sense. You don't understand. Okay, boomer. Bro, this is the future. Have fun staying poor.
They said the same thing about the internet, you know.
Another interesting feature of decentralization is the fact that when you have nobody clearly in charge, you also have nobody to blame when things go wrong. There is no accountability. This may seem odd to normal people. In our society, the whole concept of stability and reliability is predicated on accountability. Having someone in charge means they have their reputation on the line and are motivated to act trustworthy. We have an elaborate justice system that protects and holds people accountable. But what happens when nobody's in charge? Where is there any motivation to be trustworthy? How do you ensure fairness and justice? Crypto proponents argue you don't need trust. The system is trustless. Code is law. You might think to yourself, it still sounds like you have to trust somebody or something. Maybe instead of government, it's whoever's writing the code that runs the blockchain. There's still trust, but now there's no real accountability. That doesn't sound good.
Consensus.
So, if nobody's in charge of a decentralized system, how does anything get done? This is where another buzzword comes into play. Consensus. Like decentralization, consensus is another magic word that, as long as you don't look into it too specifically, magically solves all problems. How are decisions made regarding monetary policy? Consensus. How do we know the code running the network is reliable and solid?
Consensus.
How do we improve the technology and address future needs and expansion? Consensus! Once you decentralize the system, then consensus magically makes everything work perfectly. And if things go wrong, then consensus will fix them. This is why there are now a dozen different versions of Bitcoin. Every time one group has consensus, they leave behind another group who disagrees and follows a different path. In the world of decentralization, there's not much incentive for everybody to adopt a singular standard. And now we have 50,000 different incompatible crypto projects. And that's consensus? It seems more divisive than inclusive. You don't understand.
They said the same thing about the internet.
Okay, boomer. We're going to be talking a lot more about consensus. This is a mechanism that affects how blockchain works, and it varies from one project to another. So now let's get into the meat and potatoes. How does blockchain work?
What is blockchain?
Okay, hold on to your hats. It's going to get very technical here because crypto is state of the art and we may be using some terms that might seem difficult to grasp. Are you ready? Here we go. A blockchain is a non-editable database stored across an array of computers. That's basically it. It's just a database, often referred to as a ledger, which is, in accounting terminology, a list of transactions, usually in sequential order. On X date, person Y transferred commodity N to person Z. That's primarily what goes in a ledger. Okay, so I'm oversimplifying things a bit. Different blockchains have extra features like Ethereum's smart contracts that I'll go into later. But let's start with the basics. The main function of blockchain is simply as a database, a ledger, a record. Blockchain has a few other characteristics, obviously. It's what people call immutable, which is a fancy word for you can't change the data once it's written to the ledger. Blockchain also uses cryptography to verify that each entry in its database is original and hasn't been altered. It does this using a technology called Merkle trees, which are basically arrays of data that generate special unique codes called hashes, or digital signatures, which are then combined with later records and linked together, so that if you alter any of the data, the hashes don't line up anymore and the system is identified as corrupted. Now, I could go into the math and tech details of this, but it really doesn't matter. The end result is you have a database that can be guaranteed to be, quote, original and not altered later. Blockchain didn't invent cryptographic hashes. They've been around for more than a century. And cryptography itself goes back thousands of years, whose name is derived from Greek meaning to write a hidden secret. It should be noted that core technology used by the blockchain, Merkle trees, has been around for decades prior to the invention of crypto. This tech was patented in 1979. It has limited uses because most databases need to be editable. A write-only database is nowhere near as useful as one that can be updated. And you can use similar cryptographic hashes to verify the integrity of a read-write ledger. So there are very limited applications where the technology is needed. So that's basically what blockchain is. Does it sound super innovative? Beyond the basics of blockchain, implementing this system in a decentralized context creates additional problems that have to be solved. And this introduces a number of other unique mechanics in the world of crypto technology.
Mo decentralization? Mo problems.
When you set up a regular database, it's usually somewhat centralized. It's located on a specific computer, or in the case of a cloud-based system, across an array of virtual servers. And the operator, referred to as the DBA or database administrator, is in charge of provisioning, allocating the resources necessary to make the database work. As the DBA, you can make sure you have everything you need to run the database. Usually there's a company or agency involved that pays for the resources you're administering. You can also highly optimize the network because you can pick where and how the systems are hosted. Centralized networks are great. They can easily scale to meet demand, and you can determine who can connect to your network and who cannot, which significantly reduces the likelihood of hacks and attacks. With blockchain's decentralized nature, it's not that easy. The idea behind blockchain is that since nobody is in charge, anybody who wants to participate in the network can do so. Just install the software, fire up your own node, and you're on the network. All the nodes talk to each other and share information. You can have a huge array of nodes all around the world. This upside is also a downside. If nobody is in charge, who pays for the operation? So now some type of material incentive has to be introduced into the design in order to entice people to help operate the network. This is where the crypto mining and tokenization component comes into play.
We created the most talked about cryptocurrency on the market right now. We have 2.8 million holders, one of the fastest growing communities in the world. We won the best cryptocurrency community. Shout out to the SafeMoon Army here. So we have a valuation of around $3 to $4 billion, and we did this all in 9 months.
Tokenomics.
While not the first digital currency, Bitcoin is the first to use blockchain, and blockchain is the ledger that keeps track of special tokens that are minted or mined. This supply of tokens can be a fixed amount or an ever-increasing amount depending upon the design. BTC, which is the most popular version of Bitcoin, for example, is designed to have a maximum of 21 million coins in existence. The mining process releases a certain amount of coins over time until eventually all the coins are minted. At this point, more than 90% of the BTC that will exist is already owned by somebody. These tokens are not tangible items, even though they have names that have the word coin in them, which makes one think of a physical coin. You could argue that's misleading, or you could argue it's a useful metaphor. However, unlike coins, which traditionally have been made out of materials with intrinsic value, crypto only exists as an entry on the blockchain. On the Bitcoin blockchain, one token equals one Bitcoin or BTC. Other blockchains have different names for their tokens, like ETH for Ethereum and BCH for Bitcoin Cash, Doge for Dogecoin, etc. But they're all basically the same, a unique unit that is stored digitally in a particular location that can only be owned by one entity at a time. When these tokens are owned by people, they are assigned a particular wallet. A wallet is a digital address that can only be accessed if you know a special password. That password is called the private key. Whoever knows the private key controls the wallet and can send crypto tokens to a different wallet. The blockchain basically keeps track of which tokens are in which wallets.
Mining.
If the blockchain database is keeping track of digital currency, there needs to be a way for those operating the network to get a little piece of that action in order to help run the network. There are two ways this is done: mining and transaction fees. When the system first starts out, there aren't hardly any transactions. So another way to reward people operating the network is by giving them math problems to solve while they're running the database. So in the case of Bitcoin, every 10 minutes someone solves a problem and gets some free tokens. This is called the block reward and is produced as an incentive every time a block of data is codified in the blockchain. These math problems every node solves also serve another purpose. They make it expensive to participate on the network. Why would you need to do that, you ask? Well, to stop what are called bad actors. These are third parties that might want to sabotage or exploit the network in a way other than what it was intended for. For example, imagine you run an online chat room. If you don't police your system, it could easily be taken over by spammers. They can write scripts that would bombard people with advertisements, porn, scams, viruses, or whatever, easily disrupting your system. Well, if your system is centralized, you can simply ban those spammers or implement some kind of filter. But when the system is decentralized, there's no authority available to say who is a good actor and who is a bad actor. So a different type of scheme has to be implemented, making it expensive to participate in the network. You can still be a bad actor, but it will cost you, and that is supposed to deter bad actors. So all that extra work is needed because of
decentralization.
People spend a lot more energy to run a blockchain node than a regular system. This is called proof of work. There's a lot of controversy about this technique since the energy expended doesn't serve any real purpose other than costing resources. There are other workarounds being proposed now, such as proof of stake, where instead of wasting energy, you put up a certain amount of money or tokens as a bond to guarantee you're a good actor. If you do bad things, you can lose your stake. It's more energy efficient, but it still does nothing to stop bad actors if they're willing to spend money to mess with the network. So it's not a really solid solution, and this is just one of the many things that more than a decade later is, quote, still being worked on.
You don't understand.
Staying poor. They said the same thing about the internet.
Okay, boomer.
Transaction fees.
Another, quote, feature of blockchain is the transaction fee system. On some blockchains it's called gas, but it's basically a fee you pay to the node operators for handling the transaction. What makes blockchain different from other transactional systems is that this fee is not fixed. It is more like a tip than a fee, and you can specify any amount. Some blockchains have hard-coded minimum fees, some do not. Originally, the idea of the transaction fee was established to keep bad actors from clogging the system with bogus or disruptive transactions. Which brings up another point. How fast is the blockchain? We'll get into that in a minute, but suffice to say, blockchain is not by its nature a very fast transactional system. Bitcoin, for example, is capable of handling about 4.7 transactions per second. This is significantly less than credit card systems, which can handle thousands. This also doesn't take into account that it takes even longer for a transaction in crypto to be finalized. In Bitcoin, that can be as long as 10 minutes. The transaction fee system has two purposes: make it expensive to transact on the network to stop spam, and provide another way to pay the node operators for maintaining the network. Many blockchain token designs have a finite amount of tokens, like Bitcoin, which means at some point in the future, mining rewards will drop to zero, at which point there has to be another incentive to keep operating the blockchain, and that's when the nodes will depend exclusively on transaction fees. You would normally think a transactional database would operate in a sequential manner. Transactions are processed in the order in which they are received. But this isn't typically the case with blockchain. Instead, there's a market where transactions post different amounts of fees in an effort to get faster service. This sliding scale obviously benefits the operators of the network more than anybody else. It also means there's less incentive to make the network more efficient during times of congestion when operators can make more money. It's not very consumer friendly. Who wants to have to guess at how much it will cost to complete their transaction? Crypto developers obviously disagree. This peak time pricing model might make sense for a service like Uber because higher prices will encourage more drivers to operate during those times and handle more riders. However, blockchain doesn't usually work like that. Increased traffic simply jams the system because all major blockchains are hard-coded to handle a certain amount of transactions in a certain amount of time. And making the network handle more requires discussion, code changes, and consensus. There is no way to dynamically increase the throughput of many blockchains' base layers. More nodes entering the network during peak times don't cause performance to scale to meet demand. Blockchain's inability to scale to meet even the most modest increases in traffic is one of the many problems with the technology. So much so that this has caused many blockchains like Bitcoin to fork into different versions, some designed to handle more traffic than others. And other solutions people call L2 or Layer 2 solutions, which are basically extra layers of computer networks to help manage the queue and make it appear to handle more transactions faster. In reality, these L2 solutions are just a kludge. The core design of Bitcoin is inherently difficult to scale by its nature. With blockchain, increased fees don't make the network operate better. They just create an auction-type system where whoever pays the highest fee has the best chance of moving to the front of the line. And this ability to jump ahead of other people who may have started transactions before you also creates additional problems, like allowing people to front-run other transactions and engage in market manipulation. Once again, the decentralized design introduces a whole array of additional problems traditional databases and financial markets don't have to deal with.
Buzzwords.
Crypto uses a lot of buzzwords. Let's quickly unpack a few of these concepts.
Smart contracts.
Smart contracts are touted as a unique and amazing feature found on some blockchains like Ethereum. In addition to being able to store transaction information on the blockchain ledger, you can also store a set of instructions that can be executed to make rudimentary decisions, like when and how to execute a transaction. In other words, a smart contract is basically some if-then statements that can be interpreted when the transaction is processed. That's it. Their exclusive area of effect is the blockchain ledger. Ironically, smart contracts are neither smart nor actual contracts. Like many phrases in crypto, it's a bit misleading. Also, smart contracts are hardly an innovative technology. The concept of adding executable instructions to databases has been around for decades. The traditional term for it is called stored procedures, and its use in mainstream systems is far more advanced than the shallow implementation on blockchain. How would one use a smart contract? We'll unpack another buzzword to demonstrate.
NFTs.
NFT stands for non-fungible token, another fancy buzzword that basically means a piece of digital information that supposedly can only be owned by one person, stored in one wallet, at a time. A smart contract may be used to assign ownership of an NFT to a particular person. In reality, while people think of NFTs as art or pictures, on blockchain, they're just digital IDs or addresses to another site that indicates or hosts whatever the NFT is supposed to represent. It is possible to store an actual digital image on the blockchain, but this is rarely done because every byte of storage on the blockchain costs money. It's very expensive. To store 1K of data on the Ethereum blockchain costs 0.02 ETH, or around $64.48 at the current price of $2,015 for one token of ETH. A Bored Ape NFT at 631 pixels tall is more than 36K in size, which would cost over $2,300 in transaction fees alone to store on the blockchain. And these prices change all the time. Smart contracts also take up space on the blockchain, so the more elaborate your smart contract is, as well as how much code you have to bulletproof it, the more it costs to run. This creates another problem, as higher quality code that's more user-friendly and has better error checking is probably more expensive to use. All smart contracts do are basically write to the blockchain. What that data means in the real world, like who owns which ape picture, is somewhat nebulous and dependent upon various external systems like NFT exchanges.
DeFi.
Other uses for smart contracts are in the area of what's called DeFi, which stands for decentralized finance, another meaningless marketing metaphor that is used to describe various things in the world of crypto and blockchain. Smart contracts can be used as escrow services for transactions, holding tokens in one wallet that won't be released until a condition is met, like a certain amount of tokens appear in another wallet. This technique is used to create what is called a bridge between two different cryptocurrencies. The smart contract holds or burns tokens on one system and releases tokens on another, simulating a movement of one digital asset to another. These bridges are often targets for hackers taking advantage of vulnerabilities in smart contract code to liquidate stored tokens. Which brings up an interesting point. Is there such a thing as theft on the blockchain? The code has no way of knowing what's a legitimate transaction and what isn't. Math rules what happens. Math has no intentions, good or bad. In a decentralized world, there's no way to judge what's right and wrong when the code that runs a network allows things to happen.
Code is law. Staking.
Smart contracts have enabled a number of additional services in the crypto world, including what's called staking, where people put up crypto to lend to other people in what are called flash loans. It's a complicated scheme that claims to offer additional crypto income by letting other people temporarily use your crypto. Ultimately, the main objective is to encourage people to not sell their crypto. Cashing out is bad. That's what leads to loss of liquidity and bank runs and collapsed pricing.
DAOs.
DAO, also known as Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, are another construction built on blockchain and smart contracts. These are organizations centered around a particular objective, like raising money for a project, that offer some type of mechanism whereby stakeholders can make decisions regarding the DAO's business. It's basically similar in nature to shareholders in a corporation being able to vote on company business. Except with DAOs, there is no clear indication that stakeholders own anything. Like much of the crypto industry, there's a lot of ambiguity when it comes to what tokens mean. This is intentional to avoid regulation, as well as to try and limit the development team's liability.
Web3.
Web3 is another one of these ambiguous buzzwords. What exactly is Web3? Basically, it's Web 2 with crypto added, which often translates into tokenizing everything one can get their hands on, including games, where in-game economies mingle with crypto, creating P2E, or play-to-earn situations, where you can earn crypto tokens for game activities. As expected, there's a lot of blowback from the traditional gaming community over crypto-enabled games. Many people play games to escape the real world and aren't happy about having every leisure activity monetized or turned into a job.
Blockchain claims.
Finally, we're going to get to a collection of the most common arguments for blockchain.
Blockchain can verify authenticity.
For the first time, we can lower uncertainty not just with political and economic institutions, like our banks, our corporations, our governments, but we can do it with technology alone.
When you vote, have you ever wondered whether your ballot is actually counted? If you meet someone online, how do you know they're who they say they are? When you buy coffee that's labeled fair trade, what makes you so certain of its origin? To be sure, really sure, about any of those questions, you'd need a system where records could be stored, facts could be verified by anyone, and security is guaranteed.
Perhaps one of the most common recurring applications for blockchain involves its ability to verify the authenticity of something. Tickets, products in a supply chain, NFTs, identity info, etc. Once again, proponents of blockchain tout its infallibility. Blockchain is guaranteed to confirm what was originally put on chain is still exactly as it should be. However, This in no way can guarantee the authenticity of anything outside of the blockchain. It only guarantees once data has been stored, it wasn't changed. And this brings us to
The Oracle problem.
Long before blockchain, us software engineers had a saying, GIGO, which meant garbage in, garbage out. The concept basically means the output quality of a system is only as good as its input. The principle applies not just to all computer systems, but to all logical argumentation. Sound arguments can lead to unsound conclusions if their premises are flawed. And there's one huge flawed premise with blockchain called the Oracle problem. Blockchain cannot guarantee the validity of data initially put on chain. That requires someone else, some outside system, an oracle, that provides the input. If the oracle intentionally or accidentally provides bad data, whatever's on the blockchain will be bad as well. So at best, all blockchain can do is tell you, here's what the oracle said. Whether the data is authentic is determined by the oracle, not blockchain. What this results in is a rather significant false sense of security. Let's illustrate with the standard application for which blockchain is promoted as a solution, supply chain tracking. Let's say I have a shipment of Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee that I want to track on the blockchain. It will pass through a number of transportation hubs en route from its harvest location to its buyer. We will track this shipment on the blockchain. Each point along the way, an entry will be made on the blockchain indicating this particular bag of coffee arrived and continued onward until it reaches its destination. How do we technically track the coffee? A unique identifier is associated with the bag, the equivalent of a private key, likely a special code on a tag on the bag. At various points along the way, this tag is scanned and recorded on the blockchain. Since the blockchain is public, anybody can check on the bag's status and see where it's been. If you don't have access to the bag, you don't know that special code. So this is supposedly proof this is the same coffee from harvest to delivery. Or is it? There are several potential problems with supply chain tracking that blockchain has no power over. The first and most obvious is whether or not the right coffee is even in the bag. Whoever fills the bag with coffee beans is the first oracle that determines authenticity. Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee is very expensive, and it would be really difficult to determine whether the bag contained those specific beans or something much cheaper from elsewhere. You really don't know. So the real trust here has absolutely nothing to do with blockchain and decentralization. It's trusting the source is being honest with you. Blockchain can't do anything if they're not. Okay, so assuming the coffee is legit when it begins its journey, what happens next? The bag is transported by other parties, any of which could choose to swap the contents of the bag along the way. How would blockchain know? It doesn't. Basically, all blockchain is doing is tracking the barcode, not actually the contents of the bag. But it's even less secure than that because the barcode could be copied and slapped on another cheaper bag. Whoever registers the barcode is another oracle you have to trust. Okay, let's assume this special barcode is difficult to replicate and can't be removed, and the bag has special seals on it so that if it's tampered with, it's evident and the shipment can be refused as inauthentic. That would solve some of the problems, right? Yes, it would. And this technique is used all around the world for that very reason. Notice that blockchain has nothing to do with whether the bag is authentic. It's all the other non-blockchain technology that makes verification possible. In light of this situation, there's not a single thing that blockchain does that improves upon supply chain management. All major shipping companies have ways to track shipments. There's no need for that to be decentralized. A centralized system, as we've demonstrated, will almost always be more efficient. And the true test of whether the shipment is authentic will be a function of its packaging, not what's on the blockchain. So no, there's not a single thing blockchain brings to this situation that is better than what we've already been using for decades. And if you confront blockchain proponents about this, they'll often reply with the standard excuse, well, it's really early. The tech needs to be further developed. Exactly how can blockchain be further developed to address these issues? It doesn't make sense. There will always be a need to trust somebody in the real world. The oracle problem basically negates a huge majority of all of the value blockchain claims to bring to various markets. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about coffee, medical records, or concert tickets. There is still some outside person or centralized system that has to provide the authenticity, and there's not really a good reason that this data really needs to be stored in a public database anyway. Why should your x-rays be on the blockchain? Why should how much money you get paid be in a public database? Why should a decentralized network need to keep track of tickets issued by a specific central venue when they have their own website that's cheaper, faster, and more reliably guaranteed to be operative as long as they're in business? It really doesn't seem advantageous to deploy blockchain in any of these scenarios. Is blockchain good for verifying authenticity? The only way blockchain verifies the authenticity of anything off-chain is if we are guaranteed the authenticity prior to being added. Supply chains, tickets, voting, NFTs, medical records, etc. Authenticity is only achieved via outside authorities, also known as oracles. If the oracle is wrong, then blockchain is wrong and is an unnecessary part of the process that wastes time, money, and is a false sense of security. No enforcement. In the world of decentralization, there's nobody to enforce what blockchain says, so it's totally voluntary whether you want to accept blockchain's data as legitimate. Doing so is a function of the oracles. Adding blockchain to the authentication process only makes it slower and less fault tolerant. Conclusion? It is an illusion that blockchain verifies authenticity.
Blockchain is decentralized and not under anybody's control.
Is blockchain really decentralized?
How decentralized is Bitcoin really?
I view Bitcoin as money without masters. Decentralization is key to keeping that money without masters.
Decentralization is a technical mechanism to achieve some properties that are key to Bitcoin, namely that it's permissionless, bearer, unseizable, and survivable, so that it's very hard to shut the network down.
In earlier segments, we discussed the pros and cons between centralized and decentralized systems. It's arguable whether decentralizing something is even a good thing, but beyond that, let's examine whether or not blockchain is, in any meaningful way, actually decentralized. In order to talk specifics and cite evidence, we may single out specific cryptos like BTC and ETH, but the same can typically be said for most cryptocurrencies and various other crypto projects.
If code is law, then whoever writes the code is the ruler.
Blockchain is basically a database, which is created and operated by a specific block of computer code. Computer code is a set of instructions or rules that tells the entire system how to behave. This code is basically the law of blockchain. So, whoever writes the code is the de facto lawgiver. Blockchain code is typically thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lines of instruction, and not easy to read and understand except by those who are programming experts. Crypto proponents argue that the value of blockchain is that, quote, nobody owns the network, and, quote, nobody unilaterally controls the network. That's their idea of things being decentralized, as opposed to governments and other special interests that can impose their will on everybody else. That's the bad thing blockchain supposedly protects us from. But, in reality, are people in the crypto space really protected from private special interests exerting control over the network? Let's take a closer look. While the Bitcoin code is open source and public, what goes in that code is under the control of specific private interests. As of this writing, there are only a handful of people who have access to the source code and the ability to commit code changes. Those with access to the source are associated with for-profit corporations like Chaincode Labs, OKCoin, BitMEX, and Blockstream. There's also an association called MIT's Digital Currency Initiative. The MIT Association lends an air of legitimacy to the guardians of the source, until further investigation reveals that it is funded by Chaincode, BitMEX, Jack Dorsey, and Europe's largest digital asset management company, CoinShares, among others. It would be foolish to not assume the interests of these for-profit companies have an influence over this, quote, association, and are focused more on increasing the value of their stake and less about the technological efficiency in insulating the world from centralization. Which might explain why BTC is one of the least technologically capable versions of crypto, despite being the highest valued. So while on the outside it looks like there's some kind of decentralized association controlling the laws that run blockchain, in reality, it's a small cartel of private corporations. Also, many people think just because a project is open source, that means it's run by the community. This is false. Most open source projects have a master maintainer who has totalitarian control over the project. They are not obligated whatsoever to answer to any community, and most of the developers have other business interests they serve. In fact, many open source projects are only open source because they use code that requires any derivative work to also be open source. There is absolutely no guarantee an open source project has any oversight, nor is there any guarantee that the code is the result of community involvement. With other blockchains like Ethereum, there's an even thinner veneer of decentralization. Ethereum has its de facto king, the original programmer Vitalik Buterin, the community's Pied Piper, upon whose every word is revered.
It's 2.0, yo. It's 2.0, yo. It's 2.0, yo. It's 2.0, yo. Local Art Cathedral, we must coordinate, but we ain't no cathedral, no one subordinate. Every team and every project we can get far. Subvergic biologic, we work like a bazaar, yeah.
He's created a nonprofit organization called the Ethereum Foundation, which sounds consensual in theory, but is little more than a marketing company stacked with board members whose main skills seem to be loyalty and willingness to promote Ethereum rather than technology and finance. The real decisions regarding the future of blockchain rest with the development team, which are not in place via any reliable consensus mechanism. Like some other crypto projects, Ethereum has a published process whereby the community can petition to help direct the future of the technology. It's basically an appeal that someone can make, but ultimately it's up to the centralized, very small development team to decide what goes in code and in policy. So while there's a mechanism for, quote, consensus to apply to blockchain development, at the end of that hallway is always a small group of overseers who have the final say, and presumably nothing happens without King Vitalik's approval. So in most of these projects, we now know the code, the law, is centralized. What about other aspects of the operation?
So maybe there's only really space for 10 or 20 mining pools, so it's not very decentralized.
Is mining decentralized?
Satoshi Nakamoto, the original creator of Bitcoin and blockchain, envisioned a diverse, decentralized array of miners, working separately but in tandem to verify the authenticity of transactions on the network. While this sounds great in theory, in practice it never materialized. Recent studies show that even in the early days of crypto, mining was concentrated in the hands of a few operators. All throughout the history of Bitcoin, you had key people and groups controlling almost every aspect of the operation. In the early years, it was the development team and their associates who mined huge quantities of Bitcoin, much of which is still concentrated in large blocks of wealth today. Then, when the price of Bitcoin started to rise, it became more advantageous for miners to form consortiums than to operate independently. Today, the top 5% of mining operations get more than 80% of the block rewards. Let me say that again. The top 5% get more than 80% of the block rewards. It's simply no longer economically viable to operate an independent, decentralized mining rig. Some may argue this isn't the case for other blockchains, but the main reason is simply because they have such low traffic and their tokens are worth so little, there's no incentive at the moment to consolidate blockchain processing. As soon as a token becomes more valuable, centralization and consolidation happens. This isn't a construct specific to crypto. It happens in every industry. First, there are small groups of early adopters, but as the market grows, big players come in and take over. The same applies with crypto, and there's no way to get around it, especially when it's decentralized and nobody's in charge to make rules against monopolies. Today, we have monopolistic groups controlling most major blockchains. A small handful of mining cartels control the majority of the Bitcoin blockchain. If they decide to collude, they can unilaterally take over Bitcoin's blockchain. This is called a 51% attack. But that's a misnomer. It's not really an attack. It's just math. Whoever controls the majority of the blockchain's processing controls the blockchain. The only alternative if you don't like what 51% does is to abandon the blockchain. That's called a fork, and we'll explain that when we address another argument, whether blockchain is immutable. So thus far, we've revealed that the code, aka the law, is centralized. We've revealed that the processing of the blockchain itself is centralized. What else is left? Well, how about the infrastructure upon which trades occur?
Core infrastructure.
One of the principal features of crypto is its peer-to-peer nature. You're supposed to be able to send crypto tokens to anybody, anywhere, without any central or outside influence. In other words, nobody can stop crypto. That's at least the pitch. There are at least two big problems with these claims. The first one is the 800-pound elephant in the room that everybody in crypto ignores. The internet. Crypto people talk as if the internet is some unlimited, unstoppable, free resource like sunlight or wind. They completely take for granted the fact that without evil central governments and centralization, the internet would not exist. The entire infrastructure upon which crypto is based, upon which it is a parasite, depends on a myriad of central authorities to maintain. Nowhere in any crypto's business model is there accommodation made for helping sustain this resource. It's just assumed to always be there, unfettered and unrestricted. Unfortunately, that's not the case. There are thousands of central authorities that determine what happens on the internet, from system administrators at companies and ISPs to policymakers in government, each of whom have the ability to control or restrict any activity online if they so decide. This is especially true for governments. They are not about to allow anybody to use their resources and undermine their ability to enforce law. We've seen examples over and over of various governments restricting what can and cannot be done online, from taxation of online sales to restriction of online gambling. If government wants to control something, they can. They may not be able to control 100%, but they can control enough to make most systems impractical to use. This is especially true for crypto, and blockchain is especially vulnerable because it's not a single dark website that can move around. It's a wide open network of nodes that have to be able to identify each other, making the entire network easily targetable by authorities if needed. Just because things haven't been more tightly controlled doesn't mean they can't or won't. On top of that, there are less than a dozen private corporations that control 90% of most domestic internet traffic and are not in any way legally compelled to handle crypto traffic if they don't want to. If net neutrality hadn't been abolished, things might be a little different. You have no constitutionally guaranteed rights on a private corporate network, and that includes the vast majority of the internet. Beyond the obvious, that all crypto depends on government-subsidized infrastructure, from wireless to land-based systems to the centralized IP address and hostname systems, there is still even more centralization going on.
Trading infrastructure.
Much is touted about crypto's ability to allow people to send tokens directly to each other, but this isn't the typical way crypto is traded. In fact, the vast majority of crypto trades are not even recorded on the blockchain. They are executed on private, centralized exchanges like Binance and Coinbase. While there are ways for people to buy and sell crypto in a peer-to-peer manner with sites like Local Bitcoins, there's a huge liability using these unregulated facilitators. You're also much more likely to be directly mingling with money launderers and terrorists, and costs can be quite different from the main market prices. You're also very likely to be defrauded or implicated in some illegal activity. CEXs, or centralized exchanges, offer more protection, so this is the preferred way most people trade crypto. So it comes as no surprise to discover the vast majority of crypto transactions happen on centralized exchanges, not on the blockchain. These exchanges are monolithic central authorities, in many cases subject to much less transparency and oversight than traditionally licensed government-regulated brokerage houses. Even countries like El Salvador, who claim to have adopted Bitcoin, are all in actuality operating their own private, centralized exchanges they have exclusive control over. There's no way to tell whether the amount of Bitcoin in their exchange matches with Bitcoin on the blockchain. They can freeze or shut down accounts at will, they can close up shop and take everybody's crypto, and many have, including famous rug pulls like Quadringa, where the owner of the exchange mysteriously died and left most of their clients without access to their crypto. Even fiat that's stored on account at these centralized exchanges is not protected from fraud, unlike traditional regulated banks. There's significantly less protection for consumers on these exchanges and significantly less action that can be taken when they're defrauded. So, to summarize, while it sounds great as a talking point, once you examine all the various pieces of the crypto market puzzle, you find they are, in fact, not decentralized. Every step along the way, you will run into powerful private interests that have even more control and less accountability than in traditional markets.
Blockchain is immutable and cannot be altered.
Peer-to-peer technology that groups data into blocks and then chains those blocks together with cryptographic mathematical algorithms that produces an immutable chain of reaction. Vocabulary refresher, immutable, unchanging over time, unable to be changed, fixed, set, rigid, inflexible, permanent, established, carved in stone. That's what we want records to be.
One of the defining characteristics of blockchain is its supposed high security, its immutability, the claim that what's on blockchain is written in stone and cannot be altered. Is this really the case? Depending upon how narrow a context you choose to cherry pick, you could say it's immutable, but there are situations where if you zoom out, it is definitely not immutable. For example, let's examine the Bitcoin blockchain. Just that statement in itself is confusing. Why is that? Because the Bitcoin blockchain is not really one single immutable blockchain. There are dozens of different variations of the Bitcoin blockchain. There's BTC, the most popular version, but there's also BCH, Bitcoin Cash, and BSV, Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision, and various others. These were all originally part of a single base blockchain up to a certain point, when changes were made to the code which caused the blockchain to fork into separate versions. Anybody who owns Bitcoin Cash, if they owned it before the fork, also has coins on the original BTC blockchain. Instead of one immutable version of blockchain, now there are several different versions, and in fact, multiple copies of the actual Bitcoin tokens that can be owned by different people. So when people say, there will only be 21 million Bitcoin ever made, that's not technically true, because every time blockchain forks into a different version, that's another 21 million Bitcoin that can be owned by different people. This also involves a fallacy called no true Scotsman, where you have people arguing over which version of Bitcoin is the real Bitcoin. But ask yourself this, if blockchain were truly immutable, then shouldn't it be prohibited from forking into separate versions? Beyond the forking debate, are there other instances where blockchain can be altered? Yes.
51% attacks.
Technically speaking, anytime a majority of the blockchain operators want to do something, they can exert unilateral control over the blockchain. When it comes to decentralized consensus mechanisms, basically the majority wins. And if one or two mining operators control more than 50% of the hash power of the blockchain, then they, in fact, can do what they want, including rejecting transactions, reversing transactions, moving tokens around, and forging their own version of the blockchain and forcing everybody else to accept it. It's often called a 51% attack, but the pejorative attack is technically a misnomer, because in the decentralized world of blockchain, there is not supposed to be any central authority that can determine what is right and wrong, other than code. If the code allows it to happen, then it's, quote, legal. It's not an attack, it's consensus. This has already happened with many blockchain projects. In 2020, so-called privacy-centric, censorship-resistant blockchain Grin Networks suffered an attack that shut down the network for a while. Grin was touted as Bitcoin 2.0 and had more than $100 million in seed money invested. Today, a Grin token is worth about 7 cents, significantly less than its original $10 opening price. Bitcoin Gold suffered not one, but two 51% attacks, one in 2018 and one in 2020. Ethereum Classic suffered three 51% attacks in 2020 alone. Note that in some cases, you don't even need 51% control to alter the blockchain. Some blockchains like IOTA can be attacked with 34% control due to differences in their consensus mechanism. Some will argue this is only really a problem with small crypto operations, and the larger a blockchain project becomes, the harder it is to undermine. Now that may be true, but the key phrase is harder, aka more expensive, but certainly still possible. The higher the price of crypto, the more incentive there is to manipulate the ledger and the network. And another side effect of mining consortiums and large-scale cloud providers is that it's now possible for people to rent computing resources so they can scale up enough hash power to have influence over the network if they desire. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. Here's a good example. Look at Monero, the crypto that obscures the source of transactions, a token whose prime use now centers around money laundering, illegal drug sales, and other criminal activities. Monero is a proof-of-work token whose blockchain operations could be sabotaged easily by various law enforcement agencies who could take over a large enough portion of the network to render it unusable. There's certainly motivation for law enforcement to do this if other more direct methods fail. And in this case, the lack of economic viability is offset by the social good authorities would do by stopping illegal money laundering and other criminal activity. And this would be completely legal and within the bounds of how crypto works. Crypto developers assume if it's not financially beneficial, nobody will sabotage their network, but they don't take into account other incentives that have nothing to do with profit.
Other ways to hack the blockchain.
As cryptocurrencies evolve and add more features, they also add more weaknesses to the blockchain. Every time you add a different way to put data on chain, you create a new vector for attack. And one of the best and most prolific examples of ongoing blockchain hacking is on Ethereum and other blockchains that have a feature called smart contracts. These contracts have the power to write to the blockchain. Therefore, if they are infiltrated and manipulated, they can put data on the blockchain that is different from what they were supposed to do. Each and every day, rogue smart contracts steal people's crypto and crypto-related assets like NFTs. If blockchain is immutable, but smart contracts can be exploited, what's the difference? The end result is still the same. People get their stuff stolen. We could devote several hours to all the different ways smart contracts have, quote, hacked the blockchain. But instead, let's showcase a specific historical smart contract hack that also resulted in another very direct example of a popular blockchain being directly muted, modified, and rolled back, in complete defiance of the principles of blockchain.
The infamous Ethereum DAO hack.
In 2016, the folks behind Ethereum created another crypto project called the DAO, D-A-O, the first decentralized autonomous organization. It was basically an investment pool of crypto that was managed via a token-based consensus system ruled by Ethereum smart contracts. It was funded with $150 million in value initially, a large portion of the available crypto that was in the ETH ecosystem. People could stake their ETH for DAO tokens to participate in the organization. Smart contracts managed the token allocation. A vulnerability was soon discovered in the DAO contract code. Before the bug could be patched, some people managed to exploit it and siphon millions of dollars of tokens from the DAO account. When a bug fix was proposed, another vulnerability was found in the code patch, which prompted the Ethereum principals to propose a hard fork and just roll the blockchain back to before the hack altogether. There was much argument over this, but a lot of money and trust was on the line. This produced a schism with two separate versions of Ethereum, the rolled back version called just Ethereum, and the original version of the blockchain called Ethereum Classic. At best, the blockchain was edited and rolled back as a result of, quote, consensus, while others may say it was coerced by the development team, threatening to not support the original version of the blockchain and leave miners out in the cold if they didn't comply. The end result was still the same. The immutable blockchain was modified. So to summarize, is blockchain immutable? Well, again, depends on who you ask. Yes and no. One can answer yes to that in the same way someone can argue, is Kraft macaroni and cheese homemade, by saying, hey, I made it at home, therefore it's homemade. There's a notable disconnect between the traditional definition of homemade and what someone is claiming in that argument. Likewise, there's a similar disconnect when debating whether blockchain is immutable. It is only if you very narrowly define what immutability means and ignore the many examples of how it can and has been changed. But in a larger sense, is immutability even a noteworthy feature? As we've seen, there's plenty of scenarios where the blockchain ledger can be modified, should be modified, and has been modified, especially in the case of system improvements, hacks, and thefts.
Crypto can't be seized.
Unseizable.
You can buy land somewhere, but someone can tax it and take it away from you. You can buy gold, but someone can take it away from you. You can buy stocks, but you can never take possession of it. You can buy debt, you can never take possession of it. You can buy jewelry, people will take it away from you. And Bitcoin is the apex property of the human race. It's the first time we figured out how to create true property that you can take possession of with full custodial rights that's least likely to be impaired.
Crypto is, quote, seize-proof. This has to be without a doubt one of the most disingenuous arguments ever claimed. In reality, each and every day, somebody's crypto is seized, sometimes by law enforcement, sometimes by hackers, sometimes crypto owners themselves make stupid mistakes and cause their own crypto to be sent into nothingness, lost forever. The only way one can argue crypto can't be seized is by employing what's known as the nirvana fallacy, where one assumes there's a perfect solution to a problem and more reasonable, realistic scenarios are rejected in favor of this, quote, perfect setup. What's the perfect setup in crypto? Assuming nobody can access your private key, assuming that you never write down the key anywhere, assuming you never click on the wrong thing or get some malware or a virus on your computer, assuming that if, for example, you're threatened with prison by the IRS if you don't cough up your undeclared crypto gains, you'd prefer to go to prison instead. Assuming that if you're kidnapped by people who threaten to smash your head in with a $5 hammer, you'd rather die than reveal your private key. Congrats, you're in prison or dead, and nobody can seize your crypto yet. Back in the real world, things don't work that way. Even if you don't voluntarily reveal your private key, it can be retrieved by authorities in various ways. Most people store their keys somewhere, and the same authorities can get access to your computers and personal items and notes and seize crypto that way. Time and time again, we see more of this happening, with or without permission. Beyond that, if you want to employ the nirvana fallacy, then this same technique means that other ways of hiding wealth are also seize-proof. If I bury jars of money in a secret location that only I know, and I don't reveal that location, that money is also, quote, seize-proof. So crypto and blockchain add no special value to the situation. Anything you hide well and keep secret will stay secret. But actually, crypto is even worse than traditional ways of hiding money. If I physically hide money somewhere and you find out the location, you still have to go to where that place is and retrieve the money, which may be quite difficult. But if you get access to a person's private key, you can steal their money in seconds from just about anywhere, and they won't even know it's been seized. Not only is crypto not seize-proof, it's actually one of the most efficient ways of seizing other people's assets.
Crypto allows you to send money around the world instantly.
Yeah, you can send money. You can just download a wallet. You don't need a bank. You can download that wallet. I could send money to you, and you can send it to your friend in, wherever in the world, in Lebanon, El Salvador, wherever.
Another common crypto and blockchain claim is that it allows you to instantly send money anywhere in the world, cheaper, with no middlemen. This, like many arguments, is based on the nirvana fallacy. If you have the world's crappiest bank, which charges outrageous fees and takes days to transfer money, then maybe crypto might seem like an appealing alternative. But the reality is, almost all of us have ways to instantly transfer money from point A to B, quickly, cheaply, and conveniently. Yes, some of those transfers may take a few days to settle, but this isn't a fault of the technology. It's a feature, a byproduct of security and protection from fraud, what most people want. We've already covered previously how transaction fees work in crypto, so the argument crypto is cheaper doesn't hold water. Crypto transaction fees can vary wildly depending upon the time of day, and it's hard to even tell what fee you should pay to transfer crypto. If you don't pay a high enough fee, your transaction may never go through. You don't have this problem with traditional systems. When crypto advocates talk of speed and cheap transactions, they cherry-pick a best-case scenario and ignore everything else. But perhaps the biggest problem with this claim is the notion that sending crypto equals sending money. That's misleading. When someone needs to send money to someone else, what's the typical scenario? Usually someone needs to pay for something, right? Well, unless that something is illegal drugs, cyber ransom, or a cappuccino at a crypto-friendly coffee house in Costa Rica, chances are you can't spend what you're sent until it's converted back into fiat, aka traditional money. 99.9% of the real world doesn't accept crypto, and the 0.1% that does have limitations on how much they can accept because of money laundering liabilities. When you send money using PayPal, ACH, or Western Union, the recipient ends up with actual legal tender, real money. No additional conversion is needed to pay debts. But with crypto, the resulting tokens sent to somebody still have to be converted in order to be used as money. And that process of ending up with something you can spend involves an entirely new set of conversions, fees, and middlemen. Crypto enthusiasts ignore the almost always necessary second half of the transaction when they make this unfair comparison. Bitcoin maxis address this argument by saying they're waiting until Bitcoin comes as ubiquitous as fiat, then no conversions will be necessary. This is what we call the argument from future crypto fantasy land. In a future crypto utopia, Bitcoin will be legal tender everywhere and worth 100K plus. Then and only then will their arguments seem even remotely reasonable. Meanwhile, back in the real world, you're out of such luck. We could spend an entire hour just explaining the myriad of ways in which it's incredibly unlikely any crypto would ever be legal tender in a major country. So to summarize, sending crypto is sending crypto. Sending fiat is sending actual money, spendable everywhere. If you want crypto to be spendable like fiat, you have to convert it back into fiat. That final process involves even more time, fees, and inconvenience than simply using any of the much more reliable traditional methods like PayPal, wire transfers, MoneyGram, etc. Blockchain does not even add a single benefit to the situation.
Crypto helps bank the unbanked.
This is an often overplayed claim of blockchain and its decentralized nature. Be your own bank, they proudly exclaim. The harsh reality is in areas where you have large amounts of people, quote, unbanked, these almost always correlate with extremely resource-limited communities, very poor areas with limited infrastructure, unstable economies, and governments. It's not that bank accounts are not available as much as many of these people don't have a need for such things, and also don't qualify for services like loans which require collateral they don't have. Crypto loans require even more collateral too, so they don't solve these problems. These same communities are also unlikely to have access to the resources necessary to trade crypto, like smartphones, computers, cellular, internet, and in many cases even reliable electricity. Ironically, crypto is a difficult, complicated system for well-educated people to understand. Trying to push adoption in impoverished areas seems more exploitative than helpful. People who need access to value storage and digital transactions can opt to use simpler resources, like prepaid debit or gift cards, which do not require the special software, hardware, and internet access crypto needs, and are accepted many more places. Additionally, there are systems already helping bank the unbanked, like M-Pesa and mobile money, which are used worldwide, have less technical requirements than crypto, are much faster, and have more consumer protections. Also, there are over 1 billion non-smartphone users globally. They can't use crypto, but they can use mobile money networks. For those who lack access to traditional financial resources, there are already better options than crypto that are more accessible, more widely accepted, cheaper, more secure, and easier to use. So unfortunately, no, crypto doesn't really help bank the unbanked any more than virtual real estate solves homelessness.
Crypto is an investment.
Does crypto make sense as an investment? Is it a hedge against collapsing economies? What makes it valuable? When Bitcoin was first conceived, it was meant as a digital currency, in fact, a digital micropayment system. Its developers never imagined that it would be hoarded as an investment. This flies in the face of its design as a way to transfer value. Currencies only work if they are spent, not saved. Bitcoin's fixed amount of tokens was meant to ensure the value couldn't be diluted, not so much that it would end up being highly scarce and super valuable. That narrative is a relatively new invention that didn't surface until many years after its creation, when adoption as a currency failed and bag holders needed a new scheme to create more interest to keep the value from collapsing. And virtually every crypto spin-off since panders to this basic objective. Buy, don't sell, get rich later. But is that rational? Today, people compare crypto to gold, suggesting it's a precious thing that's rare and will only perpetually increase in value. Unfortunately, not only is there no guarantee that will happen, there's also not a single precedent in all of human history that suggests something like cryptocurrency will maintain long-term value. Gold is an element and has a plethora of industrial and material uses. It's conductive but corrosion resistant, making it a very useful material in electronic components. It's also very shiny and malleable and has been used to make both functional and desirable items for thousands of years. Gold has stood the test of time, proving that it can maintain long-term value over time and different cultures due to its tangible material benefits. Crypto and blockchain have no such qualities. Crypto is an intangible digital asset. It has no intrinsic value. It has no material use. It exclusively exists as some bits of data in a distributed database that is powered by random people who are at best temporarily motivated to maintain these databases. There is no guarantee tomorrow the Bitcoin blockchain will remain online. There are thousands of cryptocurrencies that no longer exist because there's not enough interest in operating their blockchain software. The same could happen to Bitcoin or any other crypto. This isn't to say crypto has no value. Obviously, to some, it has great value, but this is called extrinsic value, which is different from intrinsic value. Value is a function of supply and demand. If you have demand, then you have value. If supply is limited, then value increases. But limited supply with limited demand results in little to no value. Demand is the key component that gives things value, not scarcity. But not all demand is equal. There are two distinct types of demand. There is demand because of an inherent need, which exists regardless of popularity, and then there's demand which is a function of popularity. The former is intrinsic, the latter is extrinsic. Take water, for example. This commodity has significant intrinsic value. It's required for all agriculture. People need water to survive, so its value isn't dependent upon what people think of it. It provides an undeniable use regardless. These types of commodities are also a great hedge against other market forces, because no matter what happens, people will always need water. Crypto, on the other hand, has no material use. It only has value if you can convince someone else it does. All of crypto's supposed value is extrinsic. This also explains why crypto is not a hedge against inflation or other market forces. It has no additional utility during times of crisis. You can argue fiat is also exclusively based on extrinsic value, and that would be correct. But fiat wasn't created to be a commodity or an investment. It was created to be used as a temporary transfer of value. Hoarding fiat as an investment is not a good idea either. But more importantly, not all extrinsic value is equal. The extrinsic value attributed to fiat is a function of the state, the government. Its popularity is mandated by law, by the same institutions that provide you fresh water, roads, schools, and many other critical services. These same institutions also guarantee and enforce private property rights. So if you are worried the fiat system is going to collapse, note that in order for that to happen, the entire government would need to collapse. And in that case, the value of $1 would be the least of your worries. You'd also have no reliable utilities or anybody to defend your right to own your own home. So when crypto people celebrate their so-called hedge against the collapse of modern society, they naively expect everything except for fiat to magically keep working, which is absurd. So, if you want to believe crypto is digital gold and a good investment, that's your prerogative. But note that there is no evidence anything of this nature whose value is wholly extrinsic and whose popularity is a function of random people who put their own needs above the greater good would hold any long-term value. Crypto is not a hedge against inflation. It's not a hedge against traditional economies or market forces. It has no added benefit when other things go wrong. It has no use other than something to be tossed like a hot potato to the next greater fool. Caveat emptor. So, here we are, almost a decade and a half since this so-called revolutionary tech has been introduced, and where exactly are we? Blockchain technology is still searching for a real-world problem to solve. There are plenty of fake world problems blockchain claims it will solve if you believe that at any given moment the economy is going to collapse, the price of milk will soon be $100 a gallon, and everybody suddenly decides Bitcoin is the most appropriate store of value in a world where governments can't do anything right other than make sure the elaborate infrastructure upon which blockchain depends stays perfectly stable. Back in the real world, we can't even cite a single example where blockchain tech is just as good as existing tech. Almost every blockchain implementation is not only slower, but less fault-tolerant and more resource-hungry than existing systems. We're constantly gaslit with ambiguous claims like decentralization is better, crypto is a hedge against inflation, and the existing economy is about to collapse at any moment. But there's no actual evidence that's the case. The closest we get to a killer application for blockchain is criminal activity, money laundering, illegal drug sales, extortion, and fraud. People are still saying it's early. In comparison, in 13 years in the world of computer gaming, we went from the PS1 to the PS3 and PlayStation Portable. Imagine if someone told you to buy a gaming console, and for more than 13 years, there were no games available, and they were still saying, just wait, it's early. This is blockchain and crypto technology. How long are you expected to wait before it becomes obvious? The promise that this tech was going to revolutionize finance is an illusion. The promise that this tech will allow us to hedge value against inflation is an illusion. The promise that this tech will allow us to bypass governments and other authorities is an illusion. The promise that you can get rich adopting this technology for 99.9999% of people is an illusion. Please note that I'm not here to rain on your parade. I recognize people now are desperately trying to find income opportunities. I recognize that corporate globalization has basically screwed multiple generations looking for their American dream. I am not some out-of-touch boomer who is screaming at young people to shut up and get a job. I recognize a gig economy shit job is not what you deserve. There are a lot of socioeconomic problems we need to address in the 21st century. But crypto will not fix these issues. In fact, crypto compounds all of the wealth disparity and power concentration scenarios the younger generations complain about. Elon Musk, Brian Armstrong, Jake Paul, Michael Saylor, the Winklevoss twins, Snoop Dogg, Adam Back, Vitalik Buterin, Jimmy Kimmel, Paris Hilton, Matt Damon, Max Kaiser, BitBoy Crypto, Roger Ver, Gavin Anderson, Tim Draper, etc. None of these people are looking out for you, no matter what they say. Most were born with platinum spoons in their mouths or got incredibly lucky, and now they want you to believe you can be just like them if you buy the stuff they're selling. They will abandon and pretend they never had anything to do with crypto the moment it becomes a liability, because while it's your life savings, it's just another commercial for them. If you strive for an egalitarian world, the 1% aren't the ones who will give it to you. They are the ones who will convince you flipping burgers, driving for Uber, or buying Bitcoin will make you rich, when in reality, it makes them rich, not you. In summary, blockchain is not a futuristic technology. It's merely an interesting prototype that has no practical use in modern society. Blockchain's two special features are more liabilities than benefits. Its immutability makes it more suitable for criminal activity and fraud than legitimate trade. Second, its decentralized design, while being touted as a way to avoid regulation, makes it incredibly inefficient and slow. And that so-called benefit is predicated on the false notion that regulation is more bad than good, despite the fact that regulation gives us everything from clean drinking water to safe air travel. This is why blockchain and crypto tech is shrouded in a dumpster of technobabble. This is why blockchain marketing hides behind sweeping generalizations about the evils of central authorities. It can't stand on its own merit and capabilities. This is why when it doesn't make sense to you, you're told, it's still early, or you don't understand. The truth is, you were right in your hunch the first time you heard about this. It doesn't make sense as a disruptive technology. Blockchain does not give power to the people. It merely switches one set of rich, influential oligarchs with another, while convincing the minions they'll all get rich along the way. And that is the ultimate illusion.
You don't understand.
Have fun staying poor.
They said the same thing about the internet.
Okay,
you know.
boomer.